A restless mind drifts like fallen leaves upon still water. The young disciple walked into the mountain monastery believing he had entered a world of effortless peace, a sanctuary where time stood still and nothing was demanded. The bells tolled faintly through the mist, their echoes weaving with the whisper of wind in the pines. Monks moved slowly, sweeping paths, pouring tea, bowing in quiet rhythm, every motion deliberate, every silence alive. Yet, to the newcomer, it all looked like stillness, like sacred idleness. He sat beneath the old cedar tree, imagining enlightenment as eternal rest. From a shaded veranda, the old master watched, his gaze calm but piercing, like sunlight cutting fog. The disciple closed his eyes, thinking himself close to awakening, while the master smiled gently, knowing he had only just fallen asleep to truth. Days passed like drifting clouds. The young disciple spent his mornings watching others work, believing stillness to be the highest form of wisdom. He often sat in the courtyard, eyes closed, imagining the silence itself to be his teacher. Around him, monks moved with quiet purpose, sweeping, carrying water, tending to the gardens. Yet, within their calm rhythm lived awareness, within his rest, only dullness. The master passed by without a word, his sandals brushing softly against the stone floor. In that silence was a question unspoken. Was this peace or avoidance? But the disciple did not hear. He had fallen into a trance of comfort, mistaking idleness for enlightenment. At noon, when the bell called the monks to meal, the disciple lingered beneath the shade, unmoved. He thought, why hurry when all is won? He watched others bow, eat, and return to labor. Their effort seemed worldly to him, their motion unneeded. The master sat among them, eating in silence, his movements precise and humble. Every grain of rice seemed honored by attention. The disciple saw it but missed its meaning. To him, simplicity appeared dull, effort unnecessary. The master raised his gaze briefly, eyes meeting the young man's, and in that glance rested a truth louder than thunder. Laziness wears the mask of peace. That evening, clouds rolled over the peaks, painting the sky in hues of ash and silver. The disciple rested beneath the cedar once again, gazing at the mountain mist. He told himself, the world moves too much. I will master stillness. But the silence he chased was not peace. It was escape. In the hush of dusk, the master's bell rang once, clear as moonlight cutting through fog. The sound pierced his chest. For a moment, he sensed something beyond his comfort. A call. A reminder. Yet, as the echo faded, he returned to his illusion. The master stood at the temple gate, watching the sky, waiting for the storm both within and without. Night descended upon the monastery, and the sound of insects filled the cool air. The disciple lay awake, watching moonlight spill across his mat. For the first time, unease crept into his stillness, a sense that perhaps he was not resting but rotting. Beyond the paper wall, footsteps passed, the master on his nightly round. The disciple held his breath, pretending to meditate. The steps paused briefly outside his door, then moved on. In that silence, his heart beat louder than any bell. Sleep would not come. Something within him had begun to stir. A quiet suspicion that true peace was not comfort, but awakening through discipline yet unknown. The days unfolded in endless sameness, soft winds, drifting leaves, and the hum of distant bells. The disciple grew fond of the monastery's rhythm, but not its discipline. He rose late, walked slowly, and called his wandering mind meditation. The monks carried water from the river, tended to gardens, copied sutras by candlelight. He watched them with detached amusement, thinking himself beyond such labor. His favorite place was the shade of the cedar tree, where the world seemed to vanish and dreams replaced practice. The master passed by often, wordless, his shadow crossing Lin's resting form like a passing cloud. In that quiet crossing, the disciple felt a faint unease, but he silenced it quickly, mistaking guilt for depth. One morning, the master approached him gently. "The temple is running low on water," he said. "Go to the river and bring some." The disciple smiled, replying, "I am meditating, master. True water flows within." The old monk Daichi paused nearby, his eyes calm but unreadable. The master said nothing more, only turned and walked away. The disciple felt victorious, mistaking the silence for approval. Yet, when he closed his eyes again, his mind grew louder. Thoughts crashed like waves against the shore of his comfort. The wind rustled the pine branches, as if whispering that even nature moves to stay alive. But the disciple did not hear. He was too busy defending the walls of his illusion. That afternoon, the air grew thick with heat. Monks worked tirelessly, repairing the temple roof, cleaning the walkways, tending to the sick. The disciple stayed in the shade, half asleep. He heard the thuds of hammers, the sweep of brooms, the rhythm of labor, all blending into a lullaby of movement he refused to join. In his dreams, he saw himself as already enlightened, free of effort, untouched by need. But when he awoke, his chest felt heavy, his body dull. The laziness that once brought comfort now wrapped him in invisible chains. From across the courtyard, the master looked on, his eyes not filled with anger, but quiet sorrow. He knew the disciple was not resting. He was sinking. That night, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steady, drumming upon the temple roof. The disciple listened to its rhythm, telling himself he was hearing the universe. In truth, he was hiding from it. When the master entered the courtyard, rain soaking his robe, he said quietly, "Even the clouds must move to stay light." The disciple nodded, pretending to understand. The master's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, then he turned toward the meditation hall, leaving behind only the echo of dripping eaves. The disciple wrapped himself tighter in his robe, whispering that peace needs no movement. Yet, deep inside, a question began to stir. Why does true stillness feel so heavy? The next dawn arrived, shrouded in mist. The master struck the temple bell. A low, resonant hum that rolled through the valley like thunder beneath silence. All monks gathered for morning meditation. The disciple joined late, eyes heavy, back slouched. As the bell's echo faded, he felt an invisible weight pressing upon him. For the first time, the stillness no longer soothed him. It exposed him. His breath grew uneven, his thoughts restless. Across the hall, the master's eyes opened briefly, meeting his with quiet fire. In that gaze, the disciple felt stripped bare, seen for what he truly was, not at peace, but asleep. The realization burned like a spark, though he did not yet know it was the beginning of awakening. Before sunrise, the master called softly from outside the disciple's chamber. "Come," he said, voice calm as wind through reeds. Half asleep, the disciple followed, the morning air biting his skin. Mist hung low over the valley, and the sound of flowing water grew louder with each step. They reached the river, a silver ribbon threading through dark stones. "Hold this bowl beneath the waterfall," the master said, handing him a simple clay vessel. The disciple obeyed, water splashing violently against the bowl's rim. No matter how he tried, it never filled. "It overflows, master," he muttered. The old man replied, "So does your mind." The words struck like lightning, but the disciple's pride resisted. He held the bowl tighter, unaware that what he was trying to control was the very flow that gives life. The disciple tried again and again, adjusting his grip, changing his angle, but the bowl refused to fill. Frustration flared within him like trapped fire. "The bowl leaks!" he exclaimed. The master shook his head gently. "It is steady hands that hold the world," he said. The disciple looked down, realizing his hands trembled, not from cold, but from impatience. The river roared with 1,000 voices, each whispering of movement, flow, and effort. He stared at the rushing water, feeling its strength and his own weakness. The master's silence weighed heavier than stone. In that silence, the disciple finally saw, not the bowl, but his own restless mind, spilling every drop of truth before it could be held. "Master," he asked quietly, "how can one hold the river?" The old man smiled faintly. "By not holding." The disciple froze, his breath caught in the sound of rushing water. He stared into the bowl again, now empty, and saw his reflection flicker with each ripple. For the first time, he noticed the stillness beneath the movement, a rhythm older than thought. The master turned to leave, saying only, "Return when the bowl is full." Alone by the river, the disciple tried once more, slower this time. His hands steadied. The bowl filled halfway before spilling again. It wasn't success, but something inside him had shifted. He understood. It was not the bowl that must change, but the one who holds it. As the sun climbed higher, the disciple remained by the river, drenched, exhausted, yet strangely awake. The constant roar of water became a teacher, fierce, unyielding, honest. Each time the bowl tipped, he saw a mirror of his own distracted mind. Hours passed, and his anger melted into humility. The cold water no longer stung. It refreshed. He began to sense the river's rhythm aligning with his breath. When the master returned, he found the disciple still kneeling, eyes calm, bowl empty yet steady. "You did not fill it," said the master. "No," replied the disciple, "but I stopped spilling." The master's smile deepened, a silent acknowledgement that the first crack in ignorance had opened. That night, the disciple returned to the monastery changed. The air seemed sharper, the silence deeper. He sat once more beneath the cedar tree, but it no longer brought him comfort, only reflection. The world he had mistaken for stillness was alive, pulsing with unseen motion. Every creak of wood, every flicker of flame carried the echo of the river's lesson. The master's words replayed in his mind. The lazy mind is like a bowl beneath the waterfall. For the first time, he understood. Peace was not the absence of movement. It was the mastery of awareness within it. He looked toward the temple lights glowing faintly in the dark, feeling a spark within him, fragile but real. The beginning of true discipline. Before dawn, when the stars still clung faintly to the edge of night, the master appeared at the disciples' door. "For 30 days, he said softly, you will sweep the temple path before sunrise." The disciple bowed reluctantly. As he took the broom, its handle felt heavier than any sword. The air was cold, his breath a thin mist. Each stroke felt meaningless, dust returning where it had been, leaves falling as fast as he cleared. His back ached, his thoughts protested. But when he paused, the silence felt even heavier. From the veranda, the master watched quietly, eyes neither judging nor praising. "Sweep until the mind is clear," he said. The disciple resumed, angry, unwilling, yet unable to stop. Something in that repetition began to scrape the rust off his spirit. Days passed. The disciple's hands blistered, his shoulders ached, yet the broom became part of his breath. He noticed the rhythm, the whisper of bristles across stone, the fall of dust in the light. Each morning the world awoke slowly with him, birds calling, incense smoke rising, the soft sound of wind through bamboo. The monotony he once despised began to feel sacred. His mind, once tangled with resistance, began to quiet. One morning, he realized he hadn't looked toward the master in days. He no longer needed approval. The path before him, clear and simple, had become his teacher. In that silence, effort transformed into prayer. On the 10th day, rain returned. The path was slick and muddy, the broom heavy with water. The disciple hesitated, tempted to retreat, but something within urged him forward. Each sweep left streaks of brown across the gray stone, imperfect, temporary. Yet he continued, breath steady, body soaked. When he looked up, the master stood at the gate, silent as ever. The disciple didn't stop. He bowed briefly and kept sweeping. In that moment, something subtle shifted. Obedience became devotion. He no longer fought the task. He moved with it. The rain ceased to matter. The cold ceased to matter. All that remained was the simple act. One breath, one motion, one awareness. By the 20th day, something had changed completely. The act of sweeping no longer felt like work. It was a moving meditation. Each breath matched the sound of bristles. Each stroke a whisper of gratitude. The path, once cluttered, now shone with subtle order. Monks passing by noticed, bowing silently in respect. The disciple began to feel warmth in his chest, not pride, but peace. He understood that peace was not found in stillness, but in total attention. When the master approached, he said nothing. The silence between them was fuller than words. For the first time, the disciple's posture was straight, his eyes clear, his presence steady. The broom in his hand had become a bridge between effort and eternity. On the 30th morning, the master called him to stop. "The path is clean," he said. The disciple looked down, realizing his hands were steady, his breath silent, his mind still. He set the broom aside and bowed deeply. The master pointed toward the ground. "The path will gather leaves again," he said. The disciple nodded, smiling faintly. "Then I will sweep again." The old man's eyes glimmered with quiet pride. "Now," he whispered, "you understand. Stillness is not inaction. It is unbroken presence." The wind stirred gently through the courtyard, carrying fallen petals across the newly cleared stone. For the first time, the disciple didn't see it as labor undone. He saw it as life continuing. The wind howled through the mountains that night. By dawn, the sky was bruised with storm clouds, and the monastery lay buried beneath leaves, branches, and mud. The disciple stood at the gate, broom in hand, staring at the ruin of his clean path. For a long moment he felt the sting of futility. All his efforts seemed erased in one night's tantrum. He looked toward the master, who simply nodded once. A silent command. Taking a deep breath, the disciple began to sweep. The rain fell harder, soaking his robe, his hair, his spirit. The broom slid uselessly against the wet earth, but he did not stop. Each motion was a vow. "The storm may undo my work, but not my will." Hours passed. The rain thickened, the wind screamed, yet the disciple's movements grew steadier. Each sweep became an act of defiance against chaos. His robe clung to his skin, mud splattered his feet, but his breath flowed evenly. One motion, one heartbeat, one purpose. Other monks peeked from their chambers, whispering in awe. The master remained silent, but his gaze burned with warmth. The storm was merciless, but within its fury, the disciple's mind stood unshaken. He had once sought stillness by avoiding movement. Now he found it through perseverance. The world roared, yet within there was silence. By midday, exhaustion set in. His arms trembled. Blisters reopened, yet he refused to yield. The master stepped into the rain, walking toward him. "Enough?" he said softly. The disciple looked up, eyes filled with fierce light. "If I stop now, the mud will win." The master's silence deepened. He saw not stubbornness, but awakening. Together they swept, old and young, side by side, their motions slow and steady. The sound of bristles against stone merged with the rain's rhythm, forming a sacred music of effort and surrender. The disciple felt warmth rise within him, not from the body, but from the spirit burning through fatigue. When the storm finally began to fade, the courtyard lay drenched but shining. The disciple's arms hung heavy, his breath ragged. The master placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture. "The path will never stay clean," he said, voice almost lost in the wind. "Then why sweep it?" the disciple asked. The master's eyes softened. "Because each stroke sweeps the dust within." The disciple bowed deeply, tears mixing with the rain. In that moment he understood. The world would always move, decay, and return to dust. But within effort lies clarity. Stillness is not something found. It is something forged. That evening, the temple bell rang through clear air, deep and resonant. The monks gathered, their robes drying in the last warmth of the day. The disciple sat apart, gazing at the path he had swept clean once more. The stones glowed under the fading sun, scarred but pure. He realized that no storm could undo the strength he had found within. The master approached and said quietly, "You have seen the fire that lies beneath stillness. Guard it well." The disciple bowed, whispering, "It burns not to destroy, but to illuminate." The master smiled faintly, turning toward the horizon. The storm had passed, both outside and within. The valley awoke under a curtain of silver mist. After the storm, the air smelled of pine and earth, reborn. The disciple walked the same path he once swept in resentment, now clean beneath his bare feet. Every sound felt alive. The distant bell, the rustle of robes, the whisper of water from the mountains. The master stood by the cedar tree, waiting. "It is time," he said. Without another word, they began their descent toward the river. The disciple carried the same clay bowl, its surface cracked but whole. Each step was quiet, steady. He no longer walked to reach, he walked to be. At the riverbank, the disciple knelt once more. The current shimmered beneath the morning sun, calm yet powerful. He placed the bowl beneath the water, not forcing, not resisting. The stream filled it slowly, perfectly until it brimmed without spilling. The disciple lifted it with steady hands, the surface reflecting the sky's light like a mirror. He smiled faintly, tears forming unbidden. The master stood behind him, saying nothing. For a long time, only the sound of the river spoke. The disciple finally whispered, "Now the bowl is full." The master replied, "And now it can be emptied." The words settled in the air like petals, dissolving into truth. The disciple poured the water back into the river and watched it disappear without trace. In that vanishing, he saw himself, once separate, now part of the flow. Every breath, every thought, every act of labor had brought him here. To the truth that effort and stillness are not opposites, but one. The master spoke softly. "Stillness is not what you find by stopping the world. It is what remains when nothing can disturb you." The disciple bowed low, forehead touching the earth. The river roared, and the sound felt like silence. Vast, eternal, unbroken. They walked back in silence. The disciple no longer felt the need to speak, for understanding pulsed within every step. When they reached the temple, he paused by the path he had swept for a month. A single leaf drifted down, landing gently upon the stone. He smiled, bowing to it. The master watched, saying nothing, for the bow itself was the answer. Later, as evening approached, the disciple lit incense in the meditation hall. The scent curled upward in thin spirals, merging with the shadows. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. This time, not to escape thought, but to dwell fully within it. As night descended, the master approached the disciple one final time. "What have you learned?" he asked. The disciple looked toward the moon, reflected perfectly in a basin of still water. "That stillness is not found in stopping movement," he said softly. "It is found in moving without disturbance." The master nodded, eyes glimmering like stars. "Then the river flows through you now." They stood together under the vast sky, the hum of crickets rising and falling with the wind. For the first time, silence felt like completion, not emptiness. The disciple had found what he once pretended to have, peace not as rest, but as living presence. Morning broke over the mountains in a veil of soft gold. The monastery stirred to life, bells ringing, brooms sweeping, chants rising through mist. At the gate stood the disciple, now a man transformed, the stillness of the river in his breath. The master watched from afar, a faint smile beneath his calm eyes. The young monks bowed as the disciple guided them to their tasks, sweeping, carrying water, tending to the gardens. His movements were precise yet effortless, every motion a teaching without words. The master turned and began walking toward the forest path, knowing his time as teacher was ending. The wind carried the faint echo of his voice. Keep the path clean, within and without. Days turned into weeks. The disciple, now a teacher himself, no longer spoke of enlightenment. He lived it. He guided the novices not with sermons, but through simple acts, pouring tea, sweeping the floor, watching the rain. When a young monk asked, "Master, when shall I find peace?" the disciple smiled softly. "When you stop searching for it." His words were the same the old master once spoke, yet now they carried the weight of experience. In the quiet, the bell rang, its sound lingering like a breath between heartbeats. The disciple closed his eyes, not to escape the world, but to feel it entirely. One evening, as twilight embraced the mountains, the disciple walked to the river once more. The waters flowed as they always had, endless, unchanged. He knelt at the same spot where the master had once stood. The sound of rushing current brought memories of struggle, defiance, surrender, and truth. He filled the bowl again and watched it steady in his hands, the reflection of the moon unbroken. For a long moment he simply breathed, realizing that nothing had changed, yet everything within him had. The river did not teach by speech, nor by silence, but by flow. He placed the bowl down gently, letting a current carry it away. Back at the temple, the disciple resumed sweeping. The same act that once felt like punishment, now it was prayer. Each stroke of the broom aligned breath and earth, motion and stillness. The younger monks watched silently, understanding without words. The master's quarters remained empty, his robe folded neatly on the mat. His presence now, within every sound of wind and rustle of leaves. As the disciple swept, a single feather drifted from the sky and landed before him. He smiled. The world had given him its answer, not in thunder, but in quiet grace. At sunrise, the temple bell rang once more, low, deep, eternal. The disciple stood where he once began, broom in hand, heart at rest. The mountains glowed with fire as the first light touched their peaks. He looked toward the gate where the master had last stood and bowed deeply. The sound of the bell rolled through the valley, merging with the song of birds and the whispering wind. Stillness was everywhere, in movement, in sound, in breath. The path gleamed beneath his feet, clean yet ready to gather dust again. With a gentle smile, the disciple began sweeping. The story had ended and begun again.